Hi everyone, welcome to Hitwise's holiday planning webinar, where we walk through key learnings from 2018's peak retail period, as well as providing digital tactics on how to optimize for 2019. So just firstly, before we get into the presentation, a few housekeeping rules. The presentation will run for roughly about 40 minutes, and during that time, please feel free to send through any questions through GoToWebinar. After the presentation, we'll aim to answer those questions, and if we run out of time, an account manager or your Hitwise representative will get back to you as soon as possible. To start with, a little bit about Hitwise. We've been understanding the digital consumer for over 20 years. Our data is panel-based and not cookie-reliant, which allows us to see the full customer journey online. We provide a suite of services to our retail clients, including competitive benchmarking, so measuring our clients' performance against their competitors by audience, visit, and conversions. We also do a number of services around consumer insights, so discovering and pinpointing new segments to acquire online. We also provide a number of services as well for digital marketing optimization. And finally, campaign performance analytics too. My name is Lisa Liu. I'm the Global Head of Insights at Hitwise, and I'm joined today by Ange.
Hello everybody, I'm Angela Hope, Head of Retail at Hitwise. Really looking forward to taking you through the webinar with Lisa today. So firstly, we're going to keep our agenda pretty simple for today. We're going to be covering 4 key points. First, we'll look at retail's golden quarter. Was it all doom and gloom in 2018? Secondly, we'll look at Amazon's dominance, what was behind the success. We've heard a lot about Brexit and Game of Thrones this year, but what else has happened? And finally, we'll be looking at a plan of attack and how to prepare for this year's peak.
Great, thanks Ange. So firstly, looking at retail's golden quarter. Was it all doom and gloom in 2018? When we're referring to the golden quarter, we're effectively looking at October and December, so the final 13 weeks of the year. And if headlines from trades and nationals were anything to go by, the end of 2018 was the worst in a handful of years. Bricks and mortars, for instance, endured their worst November sales, as well as Christmas sales, and this just wasn't offline. A number of publications also reported that online retail saw their slowest growth in 7 years. So what do official figures say? In December 2017, we actually reported quite a positive story, as you can see with the directions of the arrows. Like-for-like retail sales were up by 0.6%. And this was very much driven by online sales as well, which grew by 7.6%. Merging these official figures with Hitwise data, we also saw a rise of 7.3% in online retail visits. Fast forward 1 year to December 2018. We were in a very different situation, as you can see as well with the direction of the arrows. Like-for-like sales were down by 0.7%. As well, Hitwise reported too a decline in online retail visits of 0.7% as well. Online sales still grew, but at a slightly slower rate than the previous year of 5.8%. So trending this out week by week over the golden quarter. As you can see, online visits were down over the majority of weeks, and this coincided with data from Ipsos Retail Performance as well, which reported a decline in footfall over the majority of weeks over the golden quarter. The only weeks that actually did see a rise year on year was that pre-Christmas window, specifically the week ending the 15th of December. So that's looking at total retail, but as we know with retail, it really encapsulates a lot of different industries and a lot of different categories. Zooming one level deeper, those categories fared quite differently in the golden quarter. Starting with the negatives, department stores, electronics, and also toy specialists did see a decline in online visits. Specifically, electronics and toys did see a dip of -3%. Health and beauty, as well as flowers and gifts, more or less saw flat online visit growth. But it was really these three key categories of fashion, house and garden, and groceries that trailblazed online. In particular, groceries and alcohol grew by 9% year on year when it came to online visits. And another positive to take is really around conversion rates. So overall for total retail, we did see slowing growth. We actually saw a dip in December, but when it came to conversions among top retailers, we saw significant growth. So we aren't seeing that exponential growth like previous years, but retailers are getting more effective at turning visits into sales. And the biggest online uplift was in that pre-Christmas window, which grew from around about 3.4% to 3.7% in the week ending the 15th of December. So in terms of percentages, that seems quite small at 0.3%. But when we're talking about millions and millions of visits, that converts to millions of different transactions. And this could be driven by several things. Retailers are getting more effective at their final push of promotions and discounts just before Christmas, and equally, shoppers are likely to be increasingly last minute with buying gifts just before the 25th of December. And another positive to take was that a number of brands and retailers across categories reported their best golden quarter to date. And just to name a few, Tesco and Aldi, they reported their best Christmas in 10 years. Speaking of luxury department stores as well, Selfridges also reported that their sales grew by 8% in December year on year. Talking about manufacturer brands like SodaStream, their visits grew by over 140% over Black Friday. Switching on to delivery, even Domino's reported a 5% rise over the golden quarter in terms of their total sales. And one stat that we thought was particularly memorable was the fact that they sold 12 pizzas every single second over Black Eye Friday. And if you don't know what Black Eye Friday is, it's the Friday just before Christmas that people get off earlier. And I think the name is fairly self-explanatory in terms of Black Eye. And speaking about standouts, we can't not mention Amazon, who they themselves reported that they broke all sales records over Cyber Week. And if we were to merge that with Hitwise data, Amazon transactions in the UK grew by 13% to reach 27 million over Cyber Week. So let's put Amazon in context, looking at the top 10 retailers. In the UK, the top 10 do dominate. They account for 42% of all online retail visits. But Amazon alone takes 26% of all online retail visits. So that's one metric looking at their size in terms of visit share. A second metric is looking at their audience reach. So 4 out of 5 unique visitors visited Amazon's site over the golden quarter. So in other words, only 1 out of 5 people didn't visit their site over that 13-week period, just really demonstrating their sheer size and dominance when it comes to the UK retail landscape.
So in summary, the retail industry was in a very different situation at the end of 2018 compared to the prior year. Total retail sales, online visits, and footfall were down. Online sales were still growing, but at a slightly lower rate than the previous year. Online conversions had grown, particularly in the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas. On top of that, a number of retailers and brands across retail verticals reported their best period to date. And we can't talk about retailer success without mentioning Amazon, who reached almost 80% of all online audiences in Q4 and received 26% of all retail visits. So this moves us on to our next section around Amazon's dominance and understanding what is driving their success. So all key categories on Amazon had grown from October to December. In particular, purchases of their own devices rose by 152%, as well as toys, children and baby, groceries and alcohol, and apparel and accessories, which saw an increase of above 70% over these 3 months. So looking at Amazon's conversion rate, we can see that they're converting nearly 2 times more than the top average retailer. If you recall on the slide earlier that Lisa showed, which are the bottom two lines, the retail average for conversions rose up to 3.7% in the week ending the 15th of December. For Amazon, which are the top two lines, their conversions peaked at 8.8% the week before Christmas, which was a significant uptake from the previous year. Amazon also attracted over 16 million unique visitors to their site each week from Black Friday to pre-Christmas. Out of those visitors, over 4 million ended up purchasing on Amazon sites each week. Excluding other top 7 retailers like Argos, Next, and John Lewis, over 3.5 million of these buyers were exclusive to Amazon. The visitors peaked over Black Friday, but their buyers and exclusive buyers peaked in the 2 weeks before Christmas, where we saw conversions at its highest. So a lot of Amazon's exclusivity is influenced by the rise of Amazon Prime, which Amazon reported having over 100 million members globally last year. Make no mistake, Amazon uses Prime to acquire and grow their loyal customers through special offers and next or same day delivery. To get those peaks in buyers and Amazon-only buyers, we can see that there are 2 key spikes for Prime signups over Black Friday and pre-Christmas week, which reached about 60,000 unique visitors or users. These new members were also highly engaged on Amazon site and were more likely to visit, for instance, the Beauty, House and Garden, and Amazon Fresh pages than a regular visitor. Interestingly, Amazon also announced on the 18th of May that they will be offering Amazon Music to Prime members for free later this year, which is a service providing access to millions of songs for normally £10 a month. This is a clear move by Amazon to try to penetrate the music streaming business dominated by Spotify and Apple. Amazon is also effectively becoming a search engine in its own right. We can see here that the number of searches that have occurred within Amazon have grown by 31% in Q4 year on year. In contrast, clicks from Google UK to the retail industry has declined by 32% year on year. Google is still seeing triple the number of search occurrences than Amazon does, but these figures are pointing to a big shift around the consumer retail search journey.
Amazon's dominance is clear. They're seeing over 18 million visitors to their site for 5 weeks straight from Black Friday to Christmas. As Ange had pointed out, over 4 million end up buying and over 3 million are also exclusive to Amazon, stripping out the top 7 retailers. Additionally, searches occurring within Amazon are growing, coinciding with the searches on Google declining to the retail industry. And through recent announcements, we predict or we expect that Prime would play an even larger role to getting Amazon a greater share of the pie in other categories, such as music streaming. Which brings us on to our next section, what has happened this year? Firstly, let's answer, what do people care about more this year? So that's quite a big question, and one way to answer that is by looking at how searches and how search volumes have grown year on year. So we can't talk about 2019 without talking about these top 2 things, Brexit and Game of Thrones, which have dominated headlines, probably more for the negative, particularly for Game of Thrones. But on a positive note, something that we pointed out in the Christmas Unwrapped webinar, we are still seeing increased growth in people searching for veganism, palm oil, sustainable fashion, as well as single-use plastic. And the biggest year-on-year differences, aside from Brexit and Game of Thrones, was was plastic and sustainability as well. Another trend that's continued for last year is the slowdown in online traffic. In this chart, we're looking at the Hitwise Fashion 150, and the biggest drops in growth have actually come from the fast fashion tier, where in summer 2018, this tier was seeing online growth of around 20% plus, which has now dropped to around 5% plus since the start of the year. More recently, in the month of April, actually saw a decline. The mid-tier as well is continually seeing a squeeze with flat growth throughout the year, and it's only really that premium tier that's growing in online visits since last year. But like last year, conversion rates are growing. In this chart, we're looking at the average of 40 top retailers, and each month we're seeing that consistent growth in average conversions from around 2.2% to 2.4, 2.5%. Again, this is looking like a very small difference of only about 0.2%. But when we put that in context with the millions and billions of visits that the retail industry gets, this is a huge difference in terms of online transactions that are occurring online. So in summary, online activity is again slowing, but retailers are continually getting more effective at making each visit turn into an online sale. And the rise in conversions is driven in part by consumers getting more comfortable and more confident with buying on their mobile devices, as the user experience also is improving on mobile devices as well. This coincides with recent stats being published by IAB and PwC, which actually reported that mobile ad spend has finally overtaken desktop. So in other words, 2018, we've said it for several years now, it's finally the year of mobile. So what are some of the stats supporting that? Mobile ad share grew to 51%, which was up from 45% compared to the previous year. In terms of actual pounds or dollars, this is an increase of 1.65 billion year on year. And taking a step back, total ad spend, which includes smartphones, mobile, and also desktop, we've seen an increase of 15% in the UK as well, year on year. So businesses are putting more dollars into digital advertising, but a key concern and consideration top of mind for marketers are the changes occurring with ITP, or Intelligent Tracking Prevention. Following the footsteps of Apple and Firefox with their own ITP changes, Google announced earlier this year that they were considering their options, which caused an immediate downgrade and spiral to a number of leading ad tech companies. Apple's changes flew sort of under the radar, but when it comes to Google, experts are predicting sweeping changes if Google Chrome were to fully block third-party cookies, given Chrome's dominance in the browser market. So on top of that, with GDPR almost in place for almost a year now, marketers really need to assess how and where are they sourcing their customers.
So a lot of trends have continued through to 2019. We've seen that online visits are slowing down, but online conversions continue to rise. Ethical retail and veganism are becoming more mainstream, as the searches for Brexit and the Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, sorry, Lisa. On the marketing tech landscape, there are big shifts happening. Mobile ad spend has finally overtaken desktop, and in general, total ad spend has grown 15% year on year. But the industry is nervous. Google's potential ITP change could restrict access to third-party cookies and dangerously increase reliance on their first-party data, as is the case with the growing dominance of Amazon in the retail industry. So, how can retailers prepare for peak this year? This moves us on to the final section around your plan of attack. We've put together 5 core recommendations on how retailers and brands can get the most out of their online data to plan for peak. As Lisa mentioned, Hitwise data is panel-based and not cookie reliant, and this really helps us to help our clients understand their current audiences, to segment and target their potential buyers, to track performance on a category level and compare that versus competition. We can spot fast-moving trends and report and optimize over peak, down to the day or even by the hour. Our first recommendation is to really understand what your audience cares about and benchmark that against your competitors. One way to do this is by building audiences based on searches or online behaviors that represent certain concerns and trends. In this example, we're looking at the ethical fashion audience, which is built on unique users who have searched for sustainable, slow, and ethical retail and related terms. We can see initially the retailers like ASOS and John Lewis reach over 50% of the ethical fashionista audience. This is much higher than Primark, which is at 13% online. Looking at audience composition though, we can see that H&M and ASOS are 5 times more likely to attract this audience. A key message here is to plan your audience analysis ahead of peak period. Really audit what are their concerns and their interests, and how does this compare versus your competition, so that you can feed that into your peak planning. The second recommendation is to really think about how do you segment your potential buyers and look at what they're searching for and where are they visiting online to help you improve your marketing campaigns for peak. So let's look at one example for the new console PS5, which was recently announced by Sony. Even though the console hasn't actually been launched, it's only been announced at this stage, Sony could still determine who are their potential buyers by firstly looking at, one, who's their existing owners, and two, completely new buyers searching for their products. An analysis into their digital behaviors shows that these two segments are searching for different things around PS5 and also visit different retailer and media sites. These insights can be fed directly into Sony's sponsored content and display campaigns for when the product gets launched.
So our first two recommendations were around analysing your online audiences and also segmenting your potential buyers. This leads us on to our third recommendation around competitive benchmarking. And as we saw earlier in the presentation, online visits in 2018, a trend that's continued through into 2019, are slowing down. So optimize what is happening within your site. In other words, benchmark beyond top-level visits and understand how you are performing on a category level against your competition. And we've illustrated this by looking at an example between Amazon and Tesco, zooming into two of their key categories, the drinks category and their food cupboard category as well. So looking at this year on year in the period of March 2019, Amazon's drinks category actually grew faster than Tesco at plus 15% when it came to actual purchases to overtake Tesco's total volume. But looking at the food cupboard category, Tesco's category grew faster than Amazon, rising by 21% and again overtook Amazon in total number of purchases. So those results are showing that you need to benchmark beyond top level and look at specific categories to see where you're winning or losing versus your competitors. But equally, the need is to go one level deeper and understand what brands and products are driving that growth or driving that decline. So we've continued that example looking at Tesco versus Amazon. So looking first at Tesco, a number of brands drove that increase year on year for that food cupboard category. And one brand that we did want to point out was Nando's, which saw an over 400% rise in number of purchases on Tesco's site. One call out, this was particularly driven by Nando's Pyrenees sauce range as well, which definitely spiked this year compared to last year. Looking one level deeper on Amazon, trying to understand what drove their spike in their drinks category. This was driven by a number of tea and coffee brands, as well as alcohol brands as well. Specifically, Johnnie Walker saw an increase of 180% in terms of purchases on Amazon's site. Zooming into a product level, this was very much driven by their limited edition White Walker whiskey. So jumping onto the Game of Thrones bandwagon as well. And finally, when it comes to peak period, every single day counts. Optimize your channels, your campaigns, and product promotions, even down to the hour on peak days like Black Friday. In this example, we wanted to show how Amazon did so last year. And as we saw earlier, they're dominating particularly over peak period and over those key retail dates. On Black Friday, they saw 3 major spikes in online traffic, and these were at 6 a.m., 9 a.m., and 6 p.m. Through Hitwise's hourly data, we can actually see where these peaks, what channels actually drove these peaks, and how this differed to the top retailer average. So firstly, looking at 6 a.m., search was still very much a dominant channel for Amazon, but they saw a smaller reliance than compared to the top retailer average. Instead, reward sites like Hot UK Deals, as well as news publication sites like The Telegraph, drove a greater share of clicks to Amazon's site than compared to that top retailer average. Fast forward 3 hours to 9 a.m., we saw that their channel mix also shifted again. Amazon had a greater reliance on email as well as IT publications like TechRadar compared to that top retailer average. Again, zooming forward to the 6 p.m. peak, search was still dominant, but then Amazon saw a greater share of clicks, particularly from their social media channel, driven by Facebook and YouTube, as well as email again. So the summary is that not everyone has the luxury to discount over 40% like Amazon does and be present in the number of categories that Amazon is and promote those over Cyber Week. But there are tactics that other retailers and brands can incorporate. And these include getting closer to the consumer, really understanding what they're seeking, what are their interests, what are their concerns, and also understanding when and where they are online to critically drive that traffic to your site over peak periods.
So we're going to take you through some of the key takeaways of our webinar today. We're going to start by looking at last year. So the golden quarter, pleased to say, wasn't all doom and gloom. Online retail is still driving industry growth. We saw that the impact wasn't felt across the board. There were some great success stories coming through. In particular, the interesting fact that Lisa shared was Domino's selling 12 pizzas per second on Black Card Friday, which I hadn't actually heard of before. And finally, Amazon's dominance, we know their dominance. It continues to be clear. We can see that from the number of visits they're getting, how much of that they're converting, the number of exclusive buyers they have, and of course, the increase in searches starting on Amazon. So some of the key takeaways for you to remember in terms of last year. Looking to this year, we see that online retail is still trending similarly. Online traffic is slowing, but we see that we're getting back, converting that traffic that does come through and then taking that visit and making it into a sale. I think mobile finally having overtaken desktop is something we've been waiting for, and no surprise that it's here in terms of online share and ad spend. And finally, I think it is definitely one to keep your eye on. It's definitely a serious concern. That is, if Google does consider ITP and goes ahead with that, we really need to think about how does this fundamentally change ad tech, and think about how to mitigate against cookie reliance. I think that's still something we have to wait and see the final result of, but definitely one to be considering for peak planning. And then covering top tactics that we shared with you today. So our first tactic was really to plan ahead of peak. I know most of you will be either thinking about or in peak planning right now. It's really about understanding your customer. What do they care about? Segmenting your customers and your potential buyers really helps you to understand the differences between them and how you need to speak to them as a brand to really optimize over that peak period. We've seen that the battle is within retailer sites. I think we've been saying for a while now that actually competition is fierce at a category level. It's really important to benchmark yourself by category to identify how you're performing against your competitors, but also to identify fast movers coming into your space. And that should be done by a brand and product level so that you can really think about not just how do you market and how do you work towards peak from that side of things, but actually it can really start to help with ranging and things like that at this stage. Finally, I think it's really key to be agile over peak. It is a difficult one, but it definitely is something that I would think about in terms of coordinating your marketing channels and campaigns by the day, and if possible by the hour, specifically for those peak days like Black Friday. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope that you found it useful. We will be sending the presentation as well as a link to this webinar session out as soon as we're finished, but We're now going to move on to taking some questions. But before we do that, I just wanted to also bring to your attention that we've got the Hitwise Summer Summit coming up on the 19th of June. You may already have been spoken to by your account manager. If not, and you want to know more about it, please get in contact with your account manager or send us a question online and we'll come back to you on that.
Great. We've had some really good questions come through. So the first one, this one's a good one. Planning is unrealistic. Fair. Do you think only Amazon would be able to plan like that? So Ange, would you like to answer that?
Yes. So I think,
hour by hour planning.
I think that's actually it's because you know, it is difficult to execute hour by hour. I think really the important message is to think about how do you best optimize your channels in the weeks leading up to peak. And I think the best way to do that is really not just with yourself and how your channels performed, but how did that look against your competitors and the markets, so that you can really think about, is there tweaking we can do, is there channels that we should be using closer to those peak days. It is just about working within what's possible for you, but I think it really is vital to think about your channel mix throughout the peak period.
Great question. Well, that's a good one too. Do you think ITP will be a real risk to digital marketing? We do, and that's why we also included that in the webinar as a key concern or a key consideration to think about this year. And as we saw, we've been following that topic quite closely at Hitwise, that even a slight announcement or consideration that, for instance, Google might change their ITP laws and things like that, ascending shares, basically aspiring for a number of top ad tech companies as well. So I think it's a lot of conversations that we're having with our clients as well. How can they plan ahead for that, particularly ones that are quite reliant on third-party cookies. And it also positions Hitwise quite well. And something that myself and Ange has mentioned during this presentation is that Hitwise data, Hitwise insights, comes from panel-based and is not cookie reliant, allowing us to see that full customer journey line. Thank you very much for listening to our holiday planning webinar. We hope you thought that was quite insightful and tactical as well. And great, have a great day.
Thank you, bye-bye.